Hello and welcome to the second video in this series, Stories and Songs. First things first, I cannot get to where we normally film this week, so I apologize for the continuity problems and errors that might create in your brain, but here we are. This is just a fact of life for now. When we are filming this, things are a little bit complicated on island and a little bit complicated for us as a family and where we can and can't be at the moment. So apologies for any distraction that the change in location might create. Hopefully for the rest of this series we'll be able to film where we normally film and that's not too distracting for you, but here we are. So let's get that out of the way. Second thing that we need to do is just refresh our minds why we are thinking about the things that we're thinking about, what we're talking about, what we're looking at, and how is that going to help us. So hopefully you will have engaged with the first video in this series. If not, there is a link around somewhere and you can get up to speed with that. But we are committed to this idea of thinking about stories and songs. And what does that mean? It means we're going to look at a series of Psalms. We're going to look specifically at Psalms that David has written, and we're going to do that thinking about human experience. I think there are some things that we can discover and get into with each other about our character, so who we are, and then the way that we function and the things that we do as a result of thinking about our character through this idea of human experience. So I hope those layers are stacking for you. You are capable, you are intelligent, you are able to engage with these ideas, and so we kind of want to nod at some things and suggest some things so that you can go and have some conversation and further study and thought and ideas. But ultimately what it all comes down to is this conversation, this provocation about character. Who we are matters, and it really matters when we tell people that we are apprenticed to Jesus, that we are following the way, that we are involved in the kingdom of God, the people of God. Who we are is so important, and so we're not abandoned to just develop in isolation. We're not just thrown against circumstance and situation and we just kind of see what comes out of it and see who can cope and what's going on. I think there are some things that we learn from the Word of God, so from the Bible. I think there are things that the Spirit of God helps us, and I think there are things that the body of Christ, so the church collectively, the saints, those that are following Jesus, we can help each other to figure some of this stuff out. And so that's what we want to do. We want to encourage each other in that, and then think about how we apply that through the way that we develop our own character in response to the situations, the moments, the times, the things that we are in. So hold on to that, kind of resharpen your brain. Again, the time of filming this message is a really complicated time, in addition to what has already been a really complicated year. So sometimes it's helpful just to take some time, refresh your memory, refresh your mind, engage with something, look to be sharp and focused and switched on as we get into this together. I'm going to share some thoughts with us from Psalm 18 today. So if you have a Bible with you as you are engaging with this in any way, shape or form, it's going to be helpful for you to get to Psalm 18. You're going to see some things straight away. You're going to see that there are 50 verses. So I'll let you know up front now, we're not going to line by line all 50 verses, so you can relax. We're not going to be here for hours and hours and hours. This is not a lecture on Psalm 18. This is to be an encouragement to help us think about character through human experience. So what does Psalm 18 have to do with human experience? Psalm 18 is David calling upon God in his distress. He's calling out to God, and there are some reflections in that. 2 Samuel is going to be really helpful for you in and around these things, these thoughts and these ideas with Psalm 18. You will see from some of the setup in Psalm 18, there's again a nod and a suggestion to what David is calling for help from in these reflections, his being delivered from enemies, and specifically being delivered from Saul. So 2 Samuel is going to help us paint in some of those pictures. 2 Samuel chapter 22 is really going to help sharpen and focus some of those ideas. Why? Because you're going to see the same thing in there. And so we move from this personal reflection from David into this corporate song of salvation, and what was used as a moment of reflection by David as he called on God to be rescued. And then we'll go through it in a minute, and we see kind of these moments in the structure of the psalm where David describes God intervening, that rescue, that deliverance, that salvation into that sense of victory. It transitions from this personal into something that was corporate and used as a corporate song to do that. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time thinking about that, and then I want to share an example in application with us in how I think it helps us think about character. All right, so grab a Bible and Psalm 18. I'm going to read the first 3 verses, and then I'm going to read the last 2. Everything in between is important and is helpful, but for time and for what these core messages are trying to do, this is where we're going to zoom in, paint some pictures and share some ideas, and then I would encourage you to read Psalm 18 this week. It's 50 verses, which for some of you will feel kind of really achievable really quickly and easily, and for others that might feel a little bit bigger. So take your time. We sent something out this week, said reading your Bible is not a race. It's not a competition. It's not something that we are pitted against each other in, but it can feel like that sometimes. What's of value is to sometimes slow down, take your time, get into this stuff. And if it takes you a week to read Psalm 18, that's okay. And if you want to read it 100 times this week, that's okay as well. So find your level, find where you need to engage with it, but don't read it for the sake of just skimming it. Really engage with it, spend some time in this stuff. So for us, for now, I'm going to read the first 3 and the last 2 verses, and then I want to talk about some of the structure, and then I want to talk about how I think that helps us. So Psalm 18, to the choir master, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord, who addressed the words of this song to the Lord on the day when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. He said, and we get to verse 1, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. And then we're going to fast forward all the way through to verses 49 and 50, and they say this. For this I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing to your name. Great salvation he brings to his king, and shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David and his offspring forever. So what's happening? What's going on here? So again, remember, this is the human experience is David in distress, calling upon God. Now, this is not happening in real time. This is a reflection of some things that David has been through. And there's some contention and some conversation about when this is potentially happening in the timeline of David's time on earth. Some people feel it's probably maybe earlier on in his existence, whereas others feel that this is right at the end of his life and he's reflecting back. But either way, this is with an awareness of what God has done, because there is a theme throughout Psalm 18 of distress, deliverance and victory. So if nothing else today, kind of the lens, if you like, the goggles, the filter, however you need to frame that's going to help us engage with Psalm 18, think about the umbrella terms. The bigger themes in this are distress, delivery and victory. And so as David reflects back on what has happened in his life, he is called out in a moment of distress. And I want to speak, as I've said, from these first 3 verses about that. Some of the language in here is painting pictures for us that I think are really, really helpful. What's happening in the rest of these verses? So we're going to deal with distress, the delivery, what is happening. There's kind of 2 stages to that delivery. There's the very personal, and some of the technicalities of this will excite some of you and will bore others, and that's okay. But what's exciting, and maybe for your own time and your own study, is the deliberate use of language and the deliberate repurposing of traditions, the ancient Near East traditions, and the use of some of the language and the use of some of the verse structure would have been known in its time and in its place, and it's deliberately playing with some things that would have culturally been around and would have been familiar to people engaging with the rhythm of this poem who would have sung this song. There are deliberate reworkings and reusing of other ideas and culture and thoughts, and they are making a point all the way through. Again, unfortunately, we haven't got time to get into all of the specifics of that, but if that is your thing and you're interested in that, do the study, do the research, have the conversation, reach out. I would love to speak with you if that is your type of thing. If it's not, don't panic. Understand what is happening in these verses in between is deliverance. We have this experience of David painting cosmic pictures in bright colors, metaphorically for us. He's giving us experience. He's using language to really engage with us in this journey of God traveling and intervening in his situation, of God delivering him out of the grip of his enemies, out of the grip of death, out of the grip of wickedness. And we have these incredible descriptions and these incredible journeys and these deliberate uses of language that move us from that space into this declaration of victory, which we are going to come back to. So with all of that swimming around, these first three verses, in distress, we're thinking again, remember, about human experience. And if you haven't ever felt in distress, then genuinely, I thank God for that. But I think there's potentially some moments in the last 12 months alone where maybe we have crept up on the boundaries of distress, where maybe we have snuck over the border of distress at times and felt that it's appropriate to call out and to ask for help. So if you have ever asked for help, if you have ever felt powerless, if you've ever felt overwhelmed, if you ever felt like things are not going for you, that things are working against you, that you're not seeing things move in a way that you feel you are in influence over or have any kind of control of, then that's the frame of mind that we're in this space. And so from that frame of mind, from distress, from the depths of distress, not from I can't reach the remote and this is inconvenient, not from it's cold outside or it's early or I don't want to get up or I don't want to go to my place of employment or it's your turn to change the baby or I don't want to have to deal with the minor inconvenience of a chore or whatever it might be. We're talking about the depths of distress. That's the place where we are in these verses. And what is fascinating to me is that the opening line is, I love you, O Lord, my strength. I don't know where that finds you or if that captivates you, as it has kind of caught my attention, but as a declaration in distress, to declare your love for your creator, and then to go on and use this very deliberate, again, understand this is very deliberate language of painting a picture of who God is. It's telling us about God from a human experience of distress. The Lord is my rock. He is my fortress. He is my deliverer. Again, to double down on that, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. So here, horn, we need to read as strength. So the strength of my salvation, my stronghold. So let's look at this language, the declaration of love for God, declaration of God as strength, rock, fortress, deliverer, rock again, refuge, shield, strength of salvation, stronghold. And we go on in verse 3, a call upon the Lord who is worthy to be praised. So again, telling us about who God is. God is worthy to be praised, and I am saved from my enemies. These are really deliberate, strong pictures. These are really deliberately provocative word pictures that are telling you something about the nature and the character of who God is. That's important because in times of crisis, in times of distress, in times of fear, in times of when things feel thin and weak and we feel out of control and things are beyond our patterns of influence, and maybe we don't feel that we have the tools to respond to things that we feel need dealing with, how we feel about who God is going to really determine our character, and our character is going to determine our response to those situations. So I had a conversation with a brilliant friend of mine this week, and he and I were talking about, in moments and times where you don't get your own way, who you are then really matters. When things don't break your way, when things don't turn the corner that you want them to, when you don't always get what you want, which, if we're being honest, is an unfamiliar space for many of us. We are used to, within boundaries of health, getting kind of what we want whenever we want it, within reason. And so to be in a place of deep distress, very aware and surrounded by things that are against us, who we believe God is in those moments, is massive in terms of who we are and how we are going to respond to those things. I want to encourage you that God can be trusted. God is secure, God is faithful, God is strong, God is capable of being these things. And we have this incredible interaction that I hope will make sense to us later about the character of God, past, present, and future. Again, some of you will be excited about this, some of you couldn't care less, but the tense of the language in here is telling us things past, present, and future about who God is, that is then speaking to who you are as you follow him in and through life. And this is a song of salvation. Remember, we have it in 2 Samuel 22 as personal reflection and response from David, and then we have it as a poem in Psalm 18 because it's a corporate experience now. It's not the limits of a personal experience. It's moved into, its usage has changed, its availability is different, it's wide open. It's now part of a corporate song that people are singing as a song of salvation. And I think that's important for us. Why do I think that's important? Because I think the stories that we tell ourselves about who God is will influence and affect the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. And we need to get better at telling ourselves salvation stories. We need to get better at telling each other salvation stories. We need to get better at understanding this pattern that we see in Psalm 18 of despair, deliverance, and then victory, of being in a place where we call out to God, where we call upon God as deliverer, as our strength, as our rock, as our safe place to be, as our protector, as our refuge, as our foundation, as the faithful one who can be trusted when things go against us. When we look to these salvation songs from the past, it speaks to our present that then speaks to us about a future. I hope these pieces are starting to come together for you, that as we see and understand that this is a salvation song, that we have to sing salvation songs, that we have to tell salvation stories, and we are confident of that as we, again, fast forward. And you need to engage in your own time with everything that happens in between. It's important. The theophany, that's a fun word that exciting people like me like to say, but that's as God reveals himself to us in ways that we can see and engage with and understand. There are these occasions of deliverance, and the theophany that is described is exciting, and it's cosmic, and it's multicolored, and it's dynamic, and it's doing things deliberately in culture and in time and in space, and they are really painting a picture up until the victory song comes. For this I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations, and sing to your name. So the deliverance has happened, and so in response I'm going to sing your name. Great salvation he brings to his king, and shows steadfast love to his anointed, to David and his offspring forever. Why is that exciting for us? We believe that Jesus is the perfect and eternal heir of David's line of rule over, for paraphrase, the people of God. And so as we believe that Jesus is the perfect and eternal heir of these Davidic promises, so of David's rule, of David's inheritance, of David's kingdom, that grafts you and I into this salvation song. This gives us this salvation story to tell. This gives us confidence in Jesus as our rock and as our salvation, as we cry out in this pattern and in these themes of distress, deliverance, and victory. This qualifies you and I to tell salvation stories. And I was thinking about these things and how does this help us? And I was thinking about from verses 1, 2, and 3, this use of rock, God as a rock. And maybe it chimes with me because of the Isle of Man thing, and maybe we are sometimes over familiar with that terminology, or maybe it's something else. But here's what I want to use to help us in that. This is a rock, and this, you'll be unsurprised to learn, belongs to one of my kids, and it's purely decorative, and we put up with it because they love it. It's not something that I would perhaps choose to have in my home, but it serves no other purpose than its amusement and its decoration for the kids. They love it, they think it's fun, it's something that somebody created and they enjoy having it around. This, as an emblem, as a picture, as a symbol, as a status, as anything in my home, does nothing other than suggest entertainment, a bit of amusement and a bit of fun. And those things in and of themselves are great, but this rock has no ability to offer me any sort of promise of hope in distress. Now I want to show you this rock. This is Bernie's engagement ring, and there are rocks in here. I'm deliberately being obtuse in my description. They are diamonds, but they're rocks essentially. These rocks tell a very different story. These rocks, worn as a symbol, as an idea, as a reminder, as a communication of something relational, they speak to a hope in distress that are representative of love and of commitment and of past, present and future in ways that this rock never has the ability to do. And I wonder, where do we see those symbols and those signs of hope in our relationship with God? Do we, in our distress, cry out and assume that God is like this rock, decorative and not much use in the situation that I'm in? Or do we cry out to the rock who is symbolically, metaphorically like this rock, a picture of a promise, a picture of hope, a picture of future, a picture of love? And I cry out in distress, I love you. And from that relational basis of love, I'm confident that what this rock represents is safety and is promise and is hope and is joy and is peace, and I am known and I am safe and I am secure and I am strong in the promise of these pictures versus an empty gesture. And I want to encourage you to think about these things as you engage with Psalm 18 this week, because your character can't be limited to an empty gesture. In times of distress, you can't lean on things that are empty and are void and are just not going to fill you with hope and a promise of a king who is coming. They're not going to speak to the future hope of Jesus involved in your situation or your circumstance. They're not going to help us to feel the strength of our salvation. They're not going to help us to tell salvation stories. But you need to look and you need to understand that what Jesus has done has included you in a space, in a time that qualifies you to tell salvation stories, that he has heard your cry of distress as you have called upon him, and he has moved into your situation and has made it possible for you to sing salvation songs. Now, that doesn't mean that all of your problems disappear and that you're doing it wrong up until this point if you feel any sort of distress. Instead, what it does is it gives you hope. Hope for a future where Jesus will reclaim all things, that there is a time coming when we will be with him forever, and there will be no more crying, and there will be no more gnashing of teeth, and there will be no more pain, because he will come in his perfect rule and in his perfect reign. And so the things that have to imprint, we spoke about this a little bit last week, the things that have to imprint onto your character have to be the promise of the rock of who God is, not as a gesture, not as an empty moment. And in your distress, as you cried out, he has heard you and he has delivered you dramatically, cosmically, multicolor in all of its dynamism and the excitement of heaven moving to earth in Jesus, the perfect and eternal fulfillment of the promise of God. The heir forever of David's line qualifies you to sing salvation songs, to tell salvation stories. And so instead of looking at empty gestures and your character being crumpled and moved and shaped by things that are empty and cannot speak hope, instead let your character be shaped by things that offer promise, things that are true, things that are sure, things that are forever to be. The end of Psalm 18, again, we're going to talk about the tense of the language, speaks to future. So we see, again, remind you, represented in Psalm 18, past, present, future. Jesus says, this is who I am, this is who I am, and this is who I am. And that is exciting for us in our distress, when things don't go our way, when we are in lockdowns, when we are getting contact tracing calls, when things are difficult for us in our place of employment, when relationships are stretched thin, when things don't work out for us, when physically our body starts to fail, when mentally we are in anguish. As we call out in distress, we can call out and say, I love you, Lord. And from a position of security and hope and joy, we ask God to intervene. And because of who he is and the confidence that we have in who he has always been and who he will always be, we are sheltered, we are safe, we are secure, we are known. Again, hear me, this is not a promise that you will always get your own way. This is the truth that God will always get his. And as we are moved into that situation relationally with confidence, we look to the signs of hope and not to empty gestures. And that's going to speak to your character. That's going to allow you to form a response that is going to include people in the kingdom of God, that is going to encourage other people, because you stand to lose nothing by depending on God for your security, not for hoarding your resources or managing things in a way that I'm going to protect my interests and myself in this space. The pictures that help us to look to hope forever allow us to live open-handedly. They allow us to live with soft hearts and open minds, ready to engage with people, because Jesus is faithful. Jesus is who he says he is, and has heard our cries for distress, has dramatically delivered us, and allows us victory. And victory not to be confused with getting our own way, but victory to be assured of God getting his. Read Psalm 18 this week. Take your time in it, explore the language, explore the drama of the deliverance that happens in between those bookends that I've just had the privilege to share some thoughts with you about. And then you need to connect with somebody about it. You can't sit on this stuff on your own. I know, again, in the days that we are recording this stuff in, that doesn't look like having a coffee with somebody, but that does look like sending an email or sending a message, and then full of patience and grace and kindness, when people are ready, then they will connect with you. I hope that you are looking out for each other. I hope that you are aware of what God is doing and saying to you in these moments, in these times. There are things that God is doing that are still exciting, that God is still advancing his kingdom. People are still finding and following Jesus, and that includes our community. So stay connected with each other, love each other well, look out for each other, build each other up as you spend some time exploring Psalm 18 and that rhythm that we are taught and we are encouraged in, of crying unto God, the patterns of deliverance and the rhythms of victory, and tell your salvation stories. Be brilliant. See you soon.